Around 1162, on the windswept grasslands of the Mongolian steppe, a boy was born who would one day reshape the map of the known world. His name was Genghis Khan, though at birth he was called Temujin. Few could have imagined that this child, born into a small nomadic clan, would eventually unite the Mongol tribes and establish the largest contiguous land empire in history. Temujin entered a world defined by survival. The Mongolian steppe was vast, unforgiving, and unpredictable. Families lived as nomads, moving with their herds across endless plains in search of pasture. Life revolved around horses, livestock, and the ability to endure brutal winters, scorching summers, and constant tribal conflict. Loyalty could ensure survival, but betrayal was never far away. His father, Yasugei, was a respected chieftain of the Borjigin clan. When Temujin was still a young boy, Yasugei was poisoned by members of the rival Tatar tribe after returning from arranging his son's future marriage. His death shattered the family's security almost overnight. Without their leader, Temujin's family lost the protection of their clan. Rather than honoring their loyalty, many followers abandoned Yasugei's widow, Holon, and her children. Left alone on the harsh steppe, they faced a desperate struggle for survival. Food became scarce, and the family survived by gathering wild plants, catching fish, and hunting small animals. Hunger became a constant companion, while rival tribes viewed them as vulnerable rather than worthy of respect. These hardships shaped Temujin's character long before he ever commanded an army. He learned that strength could not be taken for granted, and that survival depended on determination, adaptability, and the loyalty of those willing to stand beside you. Even within his own family, life was marked by conflict. During his youth, Temujin killed his older half-brother Begtur during a dispute over food and authority, an event recorded in later Mongol tradition that reflected the brutal realities of life on the steppe. By every measure, Temujin's childhood was one of poverty, danger, and uncertainty. He inherited no great kingdom. He commanded no powerful army. He possessed neither wealth nor security. Yet the hardships that might have broken another child instead forged the resilience of the man who would become Genghis Khan. History often celebrates mighty emperors at the height of their power. It is easy to forget that some of the greatest conquerors the world has ever known began with almost nothing. Temujin's struggle for survival did not end with the hardships of his childhood. As a young man, his growing influence made him a target for rival tribes that still viewed his family as weak and vulnerable. At one point, he was captured by the Tayikid, a rival branch of the Mongols that sought to eliminate any future threat he might pose. Bound with a wooden kang around his neck, Temujin lived as a prisoner under constant guard. Escape seemed nearly impossible. Yet, according to the secret history of the Mongols, he seized an opportunity one night to flee his captors. With the help of a sympathetic man named Sorkinshira and his family, Temujin evaded pursuit and regained his freedom. The daring escape became an early testament to his determination and his ability to inspire loyalty, even among strangers willing to risk their own safety. As Temujin rebuilt his position, he formed a close bond with Jamuka. The two swore the traditional oath of Anda, becoming blood brothers, a relationship regarded as one of the strongest personal bonds in Mongol society. For a time, they fought alongside one another and shared ambitions of restoring their fortunes. But as both men attracted followers, their visions for leadership began to diverge. Jamuka favored the traditional aristocratic order dominated by noble lineages, while Temujin increasingly rewarded loyalty and merit regardless of birth. Their friendship gradually gave way to rivalry, a conflict that would later shape the future of the Mongol steppe. During this period, Temujin married Borte, strengthening ties between their families. Soon after the marriage, however, Borte was kidnapped by the Merkit, who sought revenge for an earlier conflict involving Temujin's father. Rather than accepting the loss, Temujin assembled a coalition with the support of his father's ally Togrul and Jamuka. Together, they launched a swift campaign against the Merkit and successfully rescued Borte. The rescue was more than a personal triumph. It demonstrated that Temujin could unite allies, plan effective military action, and inspire confidence among those who followed him. Men who had once seen him as a dispossessed exile now began to recognize him as a capable leader. Each trial seemed only to strengthen him. Captivity taught him resilience. Betrayal taught him caution. Loss taught him determination. Every hardship became another lesson in survival, and another step toward becoming the man history would remember as Genghis Khan. For nearly 2 decades, Temujin fought not against foreign empires, but against the fractured tribes of the Mongolian steppe. The Mongols were divided into competing clans such as the Tatars, Naimans, Merkits, Karaits, and rival Mongol lineages, each bound by shifting alliances and generations of blood feuds. Unity seemed impossible. Loyalty was often temporary, and betrayal was a constant feature of steppe politics. Temujin understood that conquering enemies was not enough. He had to change the very system that kept the tribes divided. Traditionally, power among the Mongols was determined largely by noble birth and family connections. Temujin broke with this tradition. Instead of rewarding men simply because of their lineage, he promoted warriors for their courage, ability, and loyalty. A shepherd who proved himself in battle could rise higher than the son of a powerful chief. This revolutionary approach attracted followers from many different tribes, giving ordinary men a reason to fight not for a clan, but for a leader who recognized their merit. His greatest rival remained his former blood brother, Jamuka. Once united by friendship, the two now represented opposing visions of leadership. Jamuka defended the traditional aristocratic order, while Temujin championed a new system based on loyalty and competence. Their rivalry culminated in a series of campaigns that gradually shifted the balance of power across the steppe. By the early 13th century, Temujin had defeated or absorbed the major rival tribes. Jamuka was eventually captured by his own followers, who hoped to gain Temujin's favor. Instead, Temujin reportedly ordered the execution of the men who had betrayed their leader, declaring that those willing to betray one master could betray another. Jamuka himself was executed, according to Mongol tradition, in a manner that avoided the shedding of noble blood. With his rivals defeated, the age of endless tribal warfare came to an end. In 1206, a great assembly known as a cruelty gathered on the Mongolian steppe. There, the chiefs of the united tribes proclaimed Temujin Genghis Khan, a title commonly interpreted as universal ruler or oceanic ruler. It marked far more than a change of name. A new nation had been born. The scattered tribes that had spent generations fighting one another were now united under a single banner, a single law, and a single leader. From this moment forward, the Mongols would no longer be remembered merely as rival clans of the steppe. They would become the builders of an empire that would transform Eurasian history. The greatest leaders do more than defeat their enemies. They unite people who once believed they could never stand together. After being proclaimed Genghis Khan in 1206, Temujin's greatest achievement was not simply uniting the Mongol tribes. It was transforming them into one of the most disciplined and effective military forces the world had ever seen. Rather than relying on tribal loyalties, he reorganized his army into a strict decimal system. Units were divided into groups of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000, each commanded by officers chosen for their ability rather than their noble birth. This structure strengthened discipline and ensured that loyalty belonged first to the Khan and the empire. Every Mongol warrior was expected to master horsemanship, archery, and endurance from an early age. Mounted on swift and resilient steppe horses, Mongol cavalry could travel extraordinary distances in a single day, often outmaneuvering enemies before they even realized an invasion had begun. Genghis Khan also established an efficient intelligence network, gathering information through scouts, merchants, and local informants. His commanders carefully studied terrain, enemy strengths, and supply routes before launching campaigns, allowing the Mongols to combine speed with meticulous planning. The first major test of this new military machine came against the Western Xia. Beginning in 1209, Genghis Khan forced the Tangut rulers to submit after a series of successful campaigns. The conquest demonstrated that the newly united Mongols could defeat established kingdoms, not just rival nomadic tribes. The campaigns against the Jin would continue for years, but they fundamentally changed how neighboring civilizations viewed the Mongols. Reports spread across Asia of horsemen who appeared without warning, moved with astonishing speed, and defeated armies that greatly outnumbered them. Entire kingdoms began preparing for the possibility that the Mongols might someday arrive at their borders. Fear became one of Genghis Khan's greatest weapons. His victories were not the product of overwhelming numbers. More often, his armies were smaller than those they faced. What set them apart was their organization, discipline, mobility, and leadership. The rise of the Mongol Empire proved a lesson that history would repeat time and again. An army's strength is not measured only by its size. With discipline, preparation, and unity, even a smaller force can overcome enemies many times larger. By the early 13th century, Genghis Khan had defeated powerful kingdoms across the Mongolian steppe and northern China. Yet his most famous and devastating campaign began not with a battlefield, but with a diplomatic mission. In 1218, Genghis Khan sought peaceful trade with the Khwarezmian Empire, a wealthy state stretching across much of Central Asia under the rule of Muhammad II of Khwarezm. He dispatched a caravan of merchants to establish commercial relations. However, the governor of the frontier city of Otrar accused the merchants of espionage, seized their goods, and ordered their execution. Rather than responding immediately with war, Genghis Khan sent a second delegation, this time official envoys demanding justice and punishment for the governor. Instead, the Shah ordered one envoy executed and the others humiliated by having their beards shaved before sending them back. For Genghis Khan, the murder of ambassadors was an unforgivable violation of diplomatic custom. The possibility of peace ended. In 1219, Mongol armies crossed into the Khwarezmian Empire with extraordinary speed. Rather than advancing as a single force, they divided into multiple columns that struck from different directions, confusing defenders and preventing coordinated resistance. One after another, great cities such as Bokhara, Samarkand, Urgench, and Merv fell to the Mongol advance. The campaigns were marked by extreme violence. Cities that resisted often suffered catastrophic destruction, while those that surrendered peacefully were, in many cases, treated more leniently. The Mongols deliberately cultivated a reputation for ruthless retaliation. Survivors fleeing conquered cities carried stories of overwhelming cavalry, relentless sieges, and devastating punishment for resistance. These accounts spread far ahead of the advancing armies, causing some settlements to surrender without a fight. Fear became a weapon. A city that surrendered spared the Mongols a costly siege. A city that resisted risked becoming an example to every kingdom that still stood in their path. Modern historians continue to debate the exact scale of the destruction. Medieval chroniclers often reported enormous casualty figures that many scholars believe were exaggerated, while archaeological and historical evidence confirms that numerous cities were nonetheless devastated and populations suffered immense losses. Whatever the precise numbers, the invasion permanently reshaped the political landscape of Central Asia. By the campaign's end, Genghis Khan was no longer merely the ruler of the Mongols. He had become the most feared conqueror of his age. His enemies did not tremble only at the sight of Mongol horsemen. They feared the stories that arrived before them. History has shown that armies can win battles. But fear, carefully cultivated and relentlessly exploited, can become a weapon more powerful than any sword. Although Genghis Khan is most often remembered for his conquests, his success rested on more than military victories. As his empire expanded across Asia, he recognized that conquered lands could not be governed by force alone. To hold together territories stretching thousands of miles, he needed laws, efficient administration, and a system that rewarded loyalty over privilege. One of the foundations of his rule was a legal code commonly known as the Yasa. The exact contents of the Yasa remain the subject of historical debate, as no complete original text survives. Medieval sources suggest it included regulations concerning military discipline, crime, administration, and social order. While historians disagree on its precise form, there is broad agreement that Genghis Khan emphasized strict discipline and obedience throughout his empire. He also adopted a remarkably pragmatic approach to religion. Rather than forcing conquered peoples to abandon their beliefs, Genghis Khan generally allowed Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, Taoists, and practitioners of traditional religions to worship freely, provided they accepted Mongol authority and paid the required taxes. This policy helped reduce unrest and allowed skilled administrators, scholars, and religious leaders from many different cultures to serve the empire. Trade received similar attention. The Mongols protected merchants, diplomats, and caravans traveling across Eurasia, making long-distance commerce safer than it had been for generations. Their control of vast territories strengthened the network of routes later closely associated with the Silk Road, encouraging the movement of goods, technologies, and ideas between East and West. Perhaps Genghis Khan's most significant reform was his emphasis on merit over noble birth. Military commanders and government officials were frequently promoted because of ability, courage, and loyalty rather than family status. This approach attracted talented individuals from many different tribes and strengthened the unity of the empire. The Mongol Empire was built by conquest, but it endured because it was also organized. Genghis Khan understood that winning battles could create an empire. Only effective leadership, disciplined institutions, and practical governance could preserve one. In the final years of his life, Genghis Khan turned his attention once again to the Western Xia. Although the Tangut rulers had previously submitted to Mongol authority, they later refused to fully support his military campaigns. Determined to punish their defiance and secure the empire's frontier, Genghis Khan personally led another expedition against Western Xia in 1226 despite his advancing age. The campaign was successful, but Genghis Khan would not live to see all of its consequences. In 1227, he died during the expedition under circumstances that remain one of history's enduring mysteries. Medieval sources offer conflicting accounts. Some claim he died after injuries sustained in a fall from his horse, while others suggest illness, battle wounds, or natural causes. Because contemporary evidence is limited, historians cannot determine the exact cause of his death with certainty. Even in death, secrecy surrounded the great Khan. According to Mongol tradition, his burial place was deliberately concealed to prevent disturbance. Legends tell of soldiers erasing the route to his tomb and ensuring its location remained unknown. Whether these stories are entirely accurate remains uncertain, but one fact is undisputed. The tomb of Genghis Khan has never been conclusively identified, making it one of archaeology's greatest unsolved mysteries. Before his death, Genghis Khan had already laid plans for the future of his empire. He confirmed that his son Ogidi Khan would succeed him as Great Khan, helping to ensure a stable transfer of power. His descendants would continue expanding the Mongol Empire across Asia, the Middle East, and Europe, building upon the foundations he had created. The man who had united the Mongol tribes and conquered vast civilizations could command armies, shape empires, and alter the course of history. But he could not conquer the one enemy that defeats every ruler: mortality. Even the greatest conqueror eventually rides his final campaign. After the death of Genghis Khan in 1227, many expected the vast empire he had created to fracture. Instead, under the leadership of his son Ogidi Khan and later successors such as Mongke Khan and Kublai Khan, Mongol expansion continued at an astonishing pace. Their armies conquered territories stretching from China and Korea in the east to Eastern Europe and the Middle East in the west. At its greatest extent, the Mongol Empire became the largest contiguous land empire in human history, connecting regions that had rarely interacted so closely before. Although built through warfare, the empire also created an era in which merchants, diplomats, scholars, and travelers could move across much of Eurasia with unprecedented security. Trade flourished along routes associated with the Silk Road, while ideas, technologies, religions, and inventions spread between East and West more rapidly than ever before. The Mongols also transformed warfare and diplomacy. Their military organization, intelligence gathering, mobility, and psychological tactics influenced commanders for centuries. At the same time, their empire became a bridge connecting civilizations that had previously remained distant from one another. Yet Genghis Khan's legacy remains deeply controversial. His campaigns caused immense destruction, and many cities suffered catastrophic loss of life. Entire societies were reshaped by the Mongol conquests, leaving scars that endured for generations. At the same time, the empire he founded encouraged trade, protected long-distance commerce, and linked diverse cultures across an enormous geographic area. This dual legacy continues to divide historians. Was Genghis Khan history's greatest destroyer, or one of its greatest empire builders? Perhaps he was both. He began life as a boy named Temujin, abandoned on the harsh Mongolian steppe with no kingdom, no wealth, and no certainty that he would survive childhood. He died as the founder of an empire that permanently transformed the political, economic, and cultural history of Eurasia. Few individuals have changed the world so profoundly. Whether remembered with admiration, fear, or both, one truth remains impossible to deny. The empire Genghis Khan created did not simply redraw maps. It changed the course of history itself.